Hi everybody, Dana Litwin here again, and welcome back to Tuesday Tips for Leaders of Volunteers. This week, an urgent and very topical subject for the tips, and I'll have many more resources and links in the video description as usual for you to dive a little deeper into any of these subjects and also to find some resources and some more advice and expert help. So, we are in a state of chaos in the U.S. with not just the nonprofit sector, but government agencies with the actions of the new administration. And this is chaos that doesn't just impact us in our own country, but has worldwide ripples. The situation is also changing day to day. So one thing to keep in mind with this is that the chaos being churned up right now is a political tactic. It's part of the point to get people stressed, distressed, distracted, and to give up hope and to not fight for human rights and to keep doing the good work that you're doing with your organization. That's part of the point. So this video and other resources that I link to will hopefully help bolster your courage and your determination so that you can use some discernment and not just feel emotionally manipulated by clickbait and the push and pull of things that are executive orders or unconstitutional actions or other things that may or may not ever really go into effect despite current headlines. And if they do go into effect at some point as full legal compliances and regulations, will be weeks or months or years from now. So there is still time to focus on, and it's very important to focus on the work that your organization is doing right now in the community that you work with and serve with. Now is the time to strengthen volunteer programs, talk about it, resource volunteer programs. Do not make the mistake that organizations made in 2020 with the pandemic of cutting or immediately stopping or pausing operations out of a sense of panic or a knee-jerk reaction or, worst of all, complying in advance. You don't want to do that. There may be a time where you have to do that, but don't give in ahead of time to what the chaos gremlins want to have happen. They want to kind of chill and dampen things. I talked about some other challenges facing our sector this year in my kind of New Year's earlier in January tips, and it's already February and there's more chaos. I understand that it's particularly scary or confusing or stressful to be in AmeriCorps or part of any federally or government funded program or cause right now. That's really difficult, both nationally and internationally, like we're seeing with USAID. Again, websites and information may be taken down, but officially, as of today, the courts have said that the federal government cannot pause the spending freeze that they tried to do last week, that they got injunctioned on. There is a temporary restraining order, and hopefully that becomes permanent, that federal agencies must continue to be funded and that the agencies in charge of that funding must clearly communicate to unfreeze funds and open up use portals on the web and other online tools to make sure that that money that's allocated by Congress goes to where it's already supposed to legally go. I know that leadership and boards often are more fearful or not as courageous coming to decisions or worrying about funding. And I want to make sure that as much as you can influence or are part of leadership or maybe a board member with your organization to not make the same mistakes that so many nonprofits and government agencies made in 2020 in the early COVID-19 pandemic, which was to cut volunteer services, to slash staff, to pause programs, to poorly communicate what you're doing. Now is the time to communicate honestly, transparently, and particularly to volunteers and donors that this is how you can support our work. One response that I'm seeing that's very hopeful is that a lot of people and a lot of foundations and donor groups are looking to see how can we help, how can we preserve human rights, how can we preserve dignity in our communities and help people not just survive, but eventually get out of just survival and stress mode and actually thrive as per the missions of so many organizations and agencies. Hopefully your board doesn't give in to cowardice. There should be clear, concise, and quick internal and external communications that things are very urgent and important, and that can be a call to volunteer, and that can also be a call to action for donors. It's also important to keep making data-driven decisions that Diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, justice, if those values are part of your organization, that's still important to support. It may or may not be necessary, depending on what kind of federal funding you're getting, to alter the language slightly to maybe say community building or capacity building. Unfortunately, a lot of scientists and universities have had to play the code language game with different administrations, but make sure that your decisions are strategic for volunteer and donor engagement, and that they're data-driven, and that the diversity of your workforce, paid and unpaid, is important to the success of your mission. Join cross-movement collaborations. Who are already your community partners with your organization? How can you strengthen those relationships? Are you seeing certain corporate partners pull away or take a 180-degree turn from the values that they said were aligned with you, but they're not anymore? There are other corporations that are aligned with your values. There are other donors and foundations that are still aligned with your mission. If you're losing those, don't panic over that just yet, but try to be flexible and adaptable enough to make that difference, and particularly build on community and cross-movement collaboration and cooperation. If you feel like your client base, the people that you work with and serve in your community, and or your volunteers and staff are in, say, direct danger from federal actions, legal or illegal, that are meant to scare certain populations, especially Hispanic populations, and also indigenous populations are being targeted strangely about citizenship, which makes no sense. But one tactic that came from a really important webinar by Cal Nonprofits Association last week is to move to remote work as much as possible, remote client intakes if you don't want people gathering, or if they don't feel safe coming to your office building or your work site. As much as possible, remote volunteer activities. I know that's not always possible, especially in something that is food bank or animal services or other human services. You have to be on site, or disaster relief. But as much as possible, consider the safety of your clients and your staff and your volunteers, and do what you can to adjust for that. We're also seeing people really stepping up and stepping forward into the movement and being strong advocates. Advocacy, as much as people can lose their courage, or they want to just blend in and not have their head up, advocacy and being a loud voice can actually be really protective of you if you're more in the public eye, or you actually can potentially be a little bit safer. Measure that balance of quality of life and risk management for yourself, but it actually can help, and it helps other people have courage if they see you speaking up. Focus as much as you can locally and on your org mission. Do your work day to day. Keep serving your community. Keep working with your community. Keep co-creating with your community. And do your best, again, to discern away from the chaos gremlins and the clickbait headlines and what's real or what's not real, and just try to focus in on doing the work and not get distracted by that misinformation or disinformation. Work to change policy does not have to be partisan. So if you think you're with an organization that legally is not allowed to campaign, and I've worked for local and state government agencies where legally we couldn't campaign, but what you can do is advocate for your specific mission. You can educate the public and the community and your donors and your volunteers and leadership and everyone internally and externally who are stakeholders. You can educate people about the importance of your work and what harm is caused when funding is cut, when there aren't enough staff or volunteers to do the work. That is a really important message to get out right now, but it doesn't have to be partisan if you just focus on the work you're doing. Do not comply in advance. Again, this takes courage, but if you are such as you are able, such as it feels genuinely safe for you to do so, do not comply in advance. Little acts of being sand in the gears of chaotic things like this can make a big difference in the immediate time and also down the road. And to the leaders of nonprofits, this is a time to lead. People need to hear from you. Some fantastic leaders that have stepped up. They're actually communicating really quickly about, we're in this together and this is how we help each other. And also, if you're in fundraising, donors want to know how to solve a problem. So again, communicate the work you're doing now, the positive impact it has with continued funding, or the immediate negative impact with storytelling and data that happens if you lose funding or volunteers or staff. And above all, your work matters and you matter and people need you. So hopefully we can all get through this together. Some other positive signs: the National Nonprofit Council successfully had a lawsuit to stop the freeze of funding, and that has been held up by a court today as of February 3rd. Interfaith Alliance, Quakers are doing a lot of great work suing the administration for discrimination, religious discrimination, and First Amendment violations for targeting new Americans and immigrants in places of worship. And again, great news can be found each day, so be careful about doom scrolling or getting stressed out. Notice when and if, aside from essential work, you should or can unplug from social media and the clickbait. The algorithms are designed to make money by making people upset. Angry, sad, happy, whatever. Rage engagement is the economic model of the internet, and at least knowing that and knowing when to pull back and do as much as you can to find community, figure out with your friends and loved ones and coworkers who's got your back, who you can trust, who you can count on, and just take turns. You're going to take turns feeling really courageous one day. You might be kind of tired or depressed or distressed another day, but you don't have to be everything for everybody all the time. Find your team, find your people, and keep going. If and when the webinars that I attended are available as recordings, I will add those in, so keep checking back. And I've got some other videos that might help as well up here. We'll hopefully get you through this week and many more weeks to come. And next time on Tuesday Tips, I'll actually be celebrating the 5th anniversary of this channel, and that's going to be a little bit of a lighthearted break and fun kind of video, so I hope you join me for that next week. And have a good day. Take care. Be well.